So Jenny, if you could please start recording, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our meeting of the Southeast Area Plan Advisory Committee. And I'm Damian Cernick. I'm a senior planner with the City of Bend's Growth Management Division. Next slide, please. So as we start, we've had some changes to the display you'll see for WebEx. So for our panelists, our committee members and staff, the controls at the bottom of your screen will look a little different, but you'll see at the bottom your mute, stop video, leave the meeting icons. You'll also see on the right the participants in the chat feature that we've used in the past. So what we're going to ask folks to do as you participate is use the raise hand function that you'll see on the lower right hand side so we can get your attention. You can get our attention, I should say, and make comments. Please use the chat if you're having technical issues so that we can work with our IT staff and see what's going on. Next slide, please. Again, you'll see the controls on the bottom. When you first join the meeting, please mute yourself, and please mute yourself as until you're speaking. Since the meeting is being recorded, it's also being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel. Please state your name before you speak so we know who we're hearing from. And the meeting is also being recorded and it's going to be part of the public record. Next slide, please. So let's see, just to review again, the raise hand function is at the lower right hand of your screen next to the little megaphone. To access that, hit the participants icon on the lower right. That'll open up the list so you can see who's panelists, who's attending. And you can also raise your hand. It'll act like a toggle switch, so you can hit the raise hand icon to raise your hand, and then you can hit it again to unraise it. Again, if you have any technical issues, please chat with us using the chat function. I know I've got another committee member I need to reach out to here by email that I'll do in just a minute. Next slide, please. All right, so Chair Smith, I'll turn it over to you. Just so you know, Sarah Bono with the Parks District is trying to join, so I'm going to send her the WebEx link and hopefully have her join us here shortly.
Hey, actually, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I found it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Sarah's here. Mark her down as present.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to do a real quick roll call before I launch into too much, because if we have a quorum, then I think we can proceed with the regular agenda schedule. If we don't, my suggestion is that we skip down to kind of overview and some housekeeping things, because I don't want to have to redo all of the introductions, conflict of interests, and approval of minutes. So looks like I think we have Steve Wilson, Ken Atwell, Don Mill, Casey Berg, Sarah Bodo, myself, and Butch Hansen. Am I missing anybody?
You're missing me, Rachel Zachem.
Great,
Rachel.
Thank you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think we can, we have a quorum, so I think we can proceed with our regular agenda. So thank you, everybody. Welcome. This is our second to the last meeting. Everybody's hung in there, which is great. Really appreciate all your work and your efforts. Now, why don't we go through our introductions, just briefly say your name and whether you have any conflict of interest to disclose. I'll start first, and then I'll just call people in the order that I have on my list here. So Sharon Smith, I am a legal counsel for Ben Lapine Schools, and Ben Lapine Schools has property in the Elbow, so that is a potential conflict of interest, not an actual conflict of interest. So Steve Wilson.
Yes, hi, I'm Steve Wilson. I am a property owner in the southeast area, and I guess that would be a potential conflict. I'm present.
Great, thanks. Ken Atwell. Ken, if you can hear us, and make sure you're unmute and introduce yourself, please.
I believe Juan is working with Ken on the phone right now, so I think he's present, but maybe we can circle back in a little bit.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Don Mill.
Yes, I'm Don Mill. I'm the Bend Area Director for EDCO, and I do not have any conflicts.
Casey Berg.
Hi, this is Casey Berg. I live just outside of the property boundary, and I do not have any conflicts of interest.
Thanks. Sarah Bodo.
Hi, this is Sarah Bodo. I'm representing the Bend Park and Recreation District. And the district does own property within the southeast area.
Great. Rachel Zackham.
Hi, this is Rachel Zackham with Cascades East Transit. No conflicts.
Thanks, Rachel. And Butch Hansen.
Butch Hansen, Old Farm District neighborhood, no conflicts.
I think I captured everybody on the committee who is here. I'm just taking a quick peek, and that looks that way. So now is the time for us to review and either approve or make edits to the minutes. So at this point, I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
Yeah, I'll motion that we approve the minutes of the last meeting. Steve Wilson.
Thank you. This is Sharon. Do we have a second?
Oh, I see Don's got his hand up. Don, is that your second?
Yes, Don Mill, I second the motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, I would call for a roll call of the minutes, and Sharon Smith, chair, votes yes. Steve Wilson?
Yes.
Ken Atwell? We're still having troubles, I think, maybe.
I think so.
And Don Mill?
Yes.
Casey Berg?
Yes.
Sarah Bodo?
Yes.
Rachel Zackham?
Yes.
Butch Hansen?
Yes.
Great. All right, I think that concludes my introductory remarks and my work. I will put it back to Damien.
All right, thank you. So we have blocked out some time for public comment that we can take over the phone today. If there are folks who are calling in who want to make some comment, that's the number to use to provide comment. And I will look to see if anybody who's called in has raised their hand to see if they want to make comment right now. If you're having any issues trying to make comment, you can send me an email at dsyrnyk@bendoregon.gov.
And this is Sharon. I will also note that we'll have public comment at the end of the meeting. So if people are having trouble and get frustrated, this is not your only opportunity.
And Sharon, just to let you know, we got Ken Atwell showing up again in our queue. So I think he's still working with Juan to resolve any technical issues. What I was going to suggest is not seeing anybody right now, but if we want to start with the agenda overview and where we are in the process, we can have Joe make his presentation, and then I can keep the list open to see if anybody raises their hand while Joe's doing that, and then we can take their comments at that time.
That sounds great, Amy. And this is Sharon again. Also, help me remember that when Ken joins us, we need to have him do disclosure and vote on the minutes, because otherwise I don't think we had enough votes.
You're correct. We need at least one more.
So somebody remind us.
Okay.
So over to Joe.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Let's go to the next slide, please. And as Sharon mentioned, this is our second to last meeting. As you saw in the packet materials, what we have done is prepared what we call the summary report, which is attempting to capture all of the recommendations. And I'll say a few more words about that in a moment. And we'll, as we have done in the last two meetings, we'll give you some updates on infrastructure planning and funding related issues. You know, our process has gone a little bit longer than we had originally planned here at the end, and it's because there is a lot to do and a lot of sort of integrated parts to figuring out water, sewer, storm, and how to fund them. But the team is making great progress. So what we'll do after tonight is create an online open house for the community to catch up with us and see all of the materials that have been prepared. It's been a little over a year since we last did that, so good time to do it before we finish in December. And just a note on what we'll sort of do some extra save the dates, I think, on December. That meeting is currently scheduled for, it says TBD here, but we've calendared it for December 3rd, Thursday, December 3rd at the usual 5:30 time. And it will be important to have everybody's participation on that night. Let's go to the next slide if we could. So this next agenda item is about the summary report. I'm going to frame it here, and then Kira is going to say a few words about some of the chapters, and then I'll pick up. What this is the documentation of our process. It is the report that really captures the purpose, the rationale, some of the alternatives, some of the factual base that has been used to develop the recommendations. This has a formal side to it. It will be adopted as an appendix to the Bend Comprehensive Plan. It is the type of comprehensive plan material that is not regulatory, but is guiding and is used for long-range planning for the city. And it will be referenced upon annexation, because I noted in the policies that there's a consistency with area plans at that step. But after that, it's purely the policies and the development code that guide development reviews. So Kira, I'm going to toss it over to you, and I'll pick up in a few minutes.
Thanks. And can you go to the next slide, please? So chapter 1 of this report kind of provides the context for the overall plan. As you can see, the purpose of the Southeast Area Plan is to support annexation and future development in the area and provide a mix of residential, employment, and civic uses to develop a complete community. And this chapter also gives a little bit of background from the city's UGB expansion process in 2016, and kind of gives the rationale for why the Southeast expansion area was the kind of the first one up for area planning. And as you can see here, we've also included a timeline of our process starting back in 2018, and through all of the various topics that we've discussed at our meetings, and then to future adoption of the plan, which we expect will happen early next year. Next slide, please. And chapter 2 should look really familiar to you all. This just details the vision and guiding principles that you helped establish back in January and February of last year, and that feels like a whole lifetime ago. So I will refresh your memory a little bit. Joe did a visioning exercise with you all where you were asked to imagine what the Southeast area looked like 20 years from now. And your responses were what formed the vision statement and the principles that you see on the screen here. And these were really used to kind of guide and ground truth the concepts that we developed throughout the project. And next slide, please. Okay, this slide should also look familiar because these are photos of the Southeast area today. Chapter 3 lays out the existing conditions for the area, including land use, transportation, natural features, and public facilities like schools and utilities. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but the one thing I did want to touch on is topography. So we did a pretty detailed analysis of topography early on in the process, which you all helped us refine, so thank you. And that really helped us think through and evaluate the land use concept for this area, especially where to put the more employment focused land use designations that are more likely to have large footprint development, which we can talk a little bit more about later. Next slide, please. And finally, you might remember this market and land use analysis that was produced for this area. And chapter 4 summarizes the key findings from that, which were also used to support our refinements to the land use plan. And the big takeaway from this was really that the Southeast expansion area is well positioned to develop into a complete community with opportunities for new housing, new businesses, and new public facilities. And you can see here, it kind of goes into some of the potential land uses. And one of the ones that was identified as being potentially really good for Southeast area was kind of the flex space, also new housing options and small businesses. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joe.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Kira. So chapter 5 is includes the land use recommendations, and here is our familiar map that you all helped create. The chapter does tell the story of the 4 alternatives that we developed and then shared with the community before this was finalized. And so the development capacities and the estimated number of homes and jobs and so on are all a part of that body of work. Go to the next slide. We created a section of this chapter called Community Design, and along the way, we showed a lot of images of example land uses. We did what we called site studies, which is like is shown at the top of the figure on the left. Conceptual layouts of streets and parks and schools to try and envision what development in this area might look like. And so we have pulled those all together to some illustrative maps and broken it into sub areas. So the northeast sub area here, just for geography, the Ferguson is at the top of the map. The kind of angled street to the right is 27th. And what we're looking at here is the layout for a concept of the mix of uses up in the properties just south of Ferguson. There's exciting possibilities there. The zoning will allow for the development of a walkable commercial center. We talked about and included in the draft code the idea of a main street. Its formal name is Shopping Street under the code. And as we drew this, we saw another possibility that we hadn't envisioned before, which is the extension of Via Sandia over to 27th. That's not the only solution. There will be flexibility in the development review process to propose that type of street anywhere within that property, but it jumped out as kind of an exciting possibility. This includes every type of housing option, from apartments to townhomes to cottage clusters and middle housing, all the way to single family. And there's a very intentional progression from higher density away from the existing neighborhood, transitioning to lower densities adjacent to the existing neighborhood there. And that's been a theme in our work. We did take a little artist liberty and put in a park here. Sarah, we've taken note that there is a planning process that the district goes through. But I want to make a personal pitch that I think a neighborhood park serving what will be really kind of, I think, the biggest mix of land uses in this area would be a nice complement. Okay, so that's the northeast area. Let's go a little bit south to the next slide. And so here we are in what we call the southeast sub area. And this started out with the site study that is shown in the middle where all those little buildings are. Again, for geography, on the right is 27th, arcing into Knott. You can see the future High Desert Community Park there in the corner of the elbow. And we tested this street pattern originally in an illustrative sense to work with the issue that this area is not perfectly flat. And how might the roads respect the topography, set up reasonable development parcels, and help knit the area together and make it walkable. And so the other thing that is sort of tested with this site study is the size of buildings here. The market study recommended light industrial as a strong market or flex space that would be 10, maybe 20,000 square foot buildings, like we see over on American Lane. And those types of footprints are what are shown in this particular study. Okay, let's go on to the last of the sub areas, Southwest. And this slide really shows more, less of the detail, but more of a knitting together of the recommendations from the Southeast Area Plan, which are the brighter colors, with the recently approved Easton project on the Ward Opportunity Site, just the north of the blue. I should mention the blue. It is an illustrative concept for where an elementary school might be located. That, of course, is not either binding or certain or final by any means. But the idea has been discussed parallel to our process. And so on this illustration, we included it with all the appropriate caveats. Okay, let's go to the next slide if we could. So throughout the process, we have integrated land use and transportation together. And so that's why you see those recommendations together within this chapter and this body of work. Our street framework shown with this map turned out to be a remarkably simple and efficient plan of the east-west collector. It was difficult to find the alignment, but when we were done, it's really a fairly straightforward street, and the north-south collector, and then an additional local framework road. All of the connectivity that will emerge from existing streets or existing right-of-ways is also shown here, and the city's connectivity standards will knit it together over time. Two other things to say about this. One is we, as you will recall, have typed out all of the intersection types. We had sort of more roundabouts than finally was shown at the end, but we tested all of these. And so intersection types are now part of the recommendation. And then the traffic impact analysis was not only a technical review, but that is required as part of the compliance work that we have to do to comply with state transportation planning rule. And so that whole package of where are the streets, what types are they, where are the intersections, and will it all work from a traffic flow point of view has all been put together through this process. Okay, next slide, please. Transportation network, of course, includes multi-use paths and trails. So we basically have an east-west school-to-school concept here, from High Desert Middle over to the high school property and the future middle that will be over there. And then the multi-use paths that parallel the collector streets, or in the case of not that arterial, and then an additional branch down to the district's property in the corner of the elbow, and all of the more local connections that will connect to adjacent neighborhoods or to existing paths. So this is going to be actually kind of a unique feature when this is all put together. If you can kind of imagine this place, if you're living here, you'll never be more than about 2 blocks from the closest path to get on. Okay, let's go to the next one. So now we're on to infrastructure. It's chapter 6 in the report. We have working concepts for sewer shown on the left. As that work has progressed, the city has discovered that there are options and particularly coordination with adjacent areas, the DSL property, different ways to tie into the Southeast Interceptor. All of those continue to be analyzed. This turned out really not to be a one and done sewer plan, but a process of finding the best solutions. And so that work will continue, but we will conclude our process by noting what we accomplished to date. And this is pretty much the framework that will serve the Southeast area properties. Water is a larger story that we'll talk about in a minute. The map on the right just shows the buffer areas around the well fields. Go to the next slide, please. And then wrapping up, chapter 7 is about implementation. So we've talked a lot in recent meetings about the amendments to the comp plan map, the amendments to the policies, the new development code, or the chapter added to Ben's development code that will be added, and then the work in process, which is the funding plan, which is a placeholder at this point. And I think with the next slide, that brings us to the end. We can go back to any of these that you want to talk about. So Sharon, I think in our tradition of round robin, what I'd suggest is we go round robin to committee members and see if people have comments or questions.
Thanks, Joe. Sharon Smith speaking. Before we do that, I understand that Ken has joined us, and so I might ask that we have him introduce himself, state whether he has any actual or potential conflicts, and vote on our minutes. So Ken, if you can hear us, if you would please do that.
Okay, I can hear you, and I just unmuted. So yes, I do not have any conflicts. I am chair of the Southeast Neighborhood Association, and I approve of the minutes, but one would think that the minutes might have shown what Mr. Dill has just suggested. We have never discussed the Escondia accessing 27th without a circle. And if we're going to do that without a circle, then why do we need the other circles? You seem to feel free to put a park in front of people. I would object to anything going to an open house that is showing anything that the owner of the property has not approved. Because once you put it in front of those people on a map, there is no takeaway because there are no caveats with the public. Your market study never suggested industrial. What the industrial came from was the city's sale of industrial land in Juniper, and they hunted for industrial land to replace it. So the site plan that you showed for the elementary school, unless there's a deal, don't show it. Because people will say, that's not where I want my school. Other people will say, if the school doesn't end up there, where did my school go? And also, you better get the sewer squared away before you think that there should be approval of this. Because the sewer is a huge piece of the funding that we haven't yet discussed. And if we're going to get this done before the House Bill 2001 takes effect, and we have to go to 15 units per acre, per net acre for residential, then we have to rethink this whole thing. So I think there's a lot that you discussed in this portion that is supposed to be written and ready to go to press that is hardly ready to go to press. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Ken. Why don't we go ahead and hear from everybody, and then maybe we can put it back to staff for maybe some responses to the comments or questions that arise, because I think Ken raises a few points I think we ought to have some discussion about and make sure that we all understand the kind of what the purpose of the report is and what it is and what it isn't in terms of certainty of what gets developed. So, but we can come to that after we hear from everybody. Does that work, Damien?
It does, Sharon. Thank you. And just for the record again, this is Damien Cernick. Sharon, I also wanted to let you know that Rick Williams arrived. So before we do the round robin, I was going to ask you to ask Rick to identify himself and then make a statement on conflicts in the minutes.
Thank you, Damien. This is Sharon, and I saw that he joined us, and welcome, Rick, and I'm going to turn it to you if you're comfortable doing what Damien just suggested.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Sorry I was late. All day ODOT meeting. Rick Williams,
joy.
Transportation, and I have no conflict of interest. I've reviewed the minutes, and I have no issue with the minutes, but there are some things that I've seen here tonight that don't seem to be reflected. That's fine as long as we're explaining that going forward. So I will yield the floor back at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Sharon. You know, Rick, while you have the floor, did you want to make any comments about the report at this time?
No, the only thing that caught me off guard was the new potential elementary school site, and kind of echoing what Ken was saying. I just want to make sure that we've had a chance to discuss, which it sounds like we will, any changes that have been made before we go out to the public.
Great, thanks, Rick. This is Sharon speaking again. Maybe I'll just take a brief moment to talk about that elementary site there. And I agree with Ken and that it is by no means a certainty. The school district has been talking with Polish about whether that would be an appropriate location for an elementary school. It is certainly not a done deal. So we remain flexible that it could be a school site, but we also have the high desert property, which we would plan for an elementary site. And it really just depends upon development and growth. And so from the school district's perspective, having some flexibility and saying that very clearly in the report that this is a possible school site and that the high desert location is also another possible school site, and that neither are set in stone in this plan. So that's would be our preference, but I'd like to hear from the group if people have thoughts about that. So at this point, I'll go ahead and do the round robin. And so on my list, the next person I would ask to make comments on the plan is Steve Wilson. Steve, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Sharon. I share some of the same, I guess, concerns over things that we haven't discussed appearing on this report. I don't, I guess, philosophically have any issues with them other than they were never discussed. I do have one comment, and I'm wondering how the southwest sub area was determined when you've got a defined break in sewer access about halfway through the middle of that. You've got everything that's on the west side of that Arnold, the Arnold irrigation canal that sewers down to 15th Street, and then anything to the east of that has to be picked up by the new sewer collector that's going in. And so it doesn't make any sense to me from a development or design component to have that be one designated area or sub area when there's such a significant break in the access to sewer. And then as far as the potential future elementary school, I mean, you know, my property is directly to the east of that. You know, I've got no issue with a school going in there. I look at that and I see that the propensity of residential housing is right around there. You've got access to the park just down the street. You know, it makes a lot of sense as a location for an elementary school. Those are my primary comments.
Great, thanks, Steve.
But I would like a discussion on how that sub area was designated at some point tonight.
Yeah, Steve, this is Sharon. I appreciate that, and I think hopefully staff are making notes of everybody's comments, and when everybody's had their say, we can hear from staff, and then maybe even go around one more time, just because this is a big step. This is a big report, and I think we all need to thoroughly have our thoughts discussed.
Thank you.
Yep. And Steve, if I could ask one thing, this is Damien. Could you please lower your raised hand in the queue?
Oh,
so I know.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah.
That way we know we've got you covered. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks. This is Sharon again, and Don Mill, do you have anything you'd like to share about the report?
No, at this time I do not have any additional comments.
Great. Casey Berg?
No, I don't actually have a lot of comments at this point, but interested in listening in, and maybe a chance to comment later on would be helpful.
Great, thanks, Casey. Sarah Bodo.
Hi, so I guess I'll comment on the rendering of the park. And that's not something that, as you heard, you know, the city staff has consulted with us on. And we have not, the park district has not contacted any property owners in that area about, you know, a potential park there. But that said, I mean, I think Joe's points are really good. It's going to be an area of relatively dense residential use. Our comp plan actually does call for a neighborhood park north of Ferguson, really close there, but it's a very challenging area because it's mostly fully developed. So I see a lot of benefits to a park in that location or in that approximate location. I guess my thought was if it was, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if it was shown as a possibility, I see what you're saying, Ken, about, you know, the public says, oh, that's where it's going to be. But I would think that it would have to be clearly stated that, you know, that's an idea. The park district would definitely want to work with any property owners about that possibility.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Rick Williams, did you have anything else to add at this point? I know we did hear from you, but You get another bite of the apple.
I appreciate the opportunity, but no, I was able to say what I needed to in my last comment. Thank you, Sharon.
And Rachel Zackham.
I don't have any additional comments at this time.
Thanks. And Butch Hansen.
No, but I do appreciate some of the comments made about, if the sewer system's incomplete, we need to figure that out, and about any changes. The one thing I would state is, let's just recognize this is a planning document, so things are always subject to change. But I really don't want to go forward with anything this group hasn't discussed. That's it.
Great, thanks, Butch. I think I went through everybody. I have one kind of overarching comment that I'd like to make, and I've made it in the past, and I don't know that it's necessarily been reflected in the minutes. And so at this point, I really want to make sure that we have this reflected, and that is, I think this is a fabulous concept plan, the whole Southeast area. It's very lofty. We have a lot of beautiful elements in this. We've got, extra trails. We've got, lots of preservation of natural features. We've got very extensive public facilities plans. My big concern is we need to be mindful that this is only going to develop if it will pencil by development. If it's too costly to develop, it's going to be a plan on the shelf. And while I'm cautiously optimistic that this is such a desirable location and will attract development, I'm also a little concerned about development costs. And so I'm also wanting this group, and I myself will urge the city to try and help us come up with a finance plan that really will help this area develop, and whether that is helping participate in some of the sewer elements, providing SDT credit for some of the transportation elements. And I know staff is looking at that, and we're going to hear more about that today. But I just want to go on the record that if we adopt this plan and we have folks try to look at it for development and they say we can't make it pencil, that we can come back and make changes to it down the road. And it's more of a, let's hope it works, but if it doesn't, then we need a plan B. So that's my overarching comment. And I would now turn it back to Damien and or Joe to maybe talk about some of the comments we've heard tonight.
Damien, why don't I start and sort of invite you along the way to add, or just chime in with anything you want to add. Does that sound okay?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to start at the top with the comment of the report, or the report not showing anything that has not been approved by a property owner. And I think that gets to a little bit what Sharon was mentioning about what an area plan is and it isn't. It serves a couple of roles. It includes some very tangible recommendations, things like what will be the comprehensive plan designations on various properties and how we connect one street to another with collector streets, those kinds of things. The comprehensive plan designation being an example of something that is fixed, very defined, not really flexible. Roads being something that are plus or minus subject to local site design and so on. An area plan also serves as a expression of some possibilities and some concepts and even some aspirations. So there's elements within the report here specifically that are kind of in that category. So it's a mix of those things, very intentionally and very openly. And I guess there is a little bit of the reality that there may not, we do seek consensus, but there may be a few things that not everybody or a particular property owner agrees with. Hopefully we can reflect on our process that we've done a pretty good job finding balance and finding the things that people generally do mutually support. We've had a lot of very good, strong head nods in our last meetings. So that's a bit of an overarching issue. Damien, anything you wanted to add to that?
I think just a couple of things right now. This is Damien Cernick with the City of Bend. So regarding the area plan, one of the things that the plan says is that it's not a regulatory document, that it's intended to be the factual base behind the plan changes that we'll be bringing forward along with the changes to the development code that'll be specific for the Southeast area. It also provided us the data for doing the transportation and sewer analysis we need. And we will talk about this later in the meeting in terms of where we are with that work so that we have multiple paths for moving forward. And what I mean by that is for certain properties, their infrastructure needs going to be fairly straightforward if they're close to the street, sewer is there that they can extend, and they'll be working with Avion to provide water. For others, it will be more of a wait until infrastructure might be brought to their property, but we'll have the plans in place for knowing what and how they connect to infrastructure. Two things I wanted to go into, Joe, while I've got the floor, is regarding Ken's comment on industrial land. Going back to the work we've done to refine the map and place the industrial land in a location where it was less rocky for industrial development, but also on the intersection of the two collector roads. This industrial land is part of our overall land supply in the city for jobs that need industrial land. And one of the things that we brought out with the market and land use analysis, and I'll admit it's been a few months, was that this was an area that was going to be attractive to certain industrial land users that had less intense uses. So flex space, maybe research and development. But given its location, its transportation access, and its topography, it was not going to be attractive to what I'm going to qualify as heavy industrial land users. So people that might look for a place for heavy manufacturing, wholesale distribution, or some combination of the two. So this is still something we're bringing forward with the plan so that we have, once infrastructure is in, once the roads are extended and connected, in addition to our land supply that's serviced and ready to go. And then one final comment, Joe, on House Bill 2001. This is a bill that was passed by the legislature in 2019. It was passed by both chambers and signed by the governor. In a very brief nutshell, what it directed cities to do is to allow certain types of housing that were called middle housing in zones where we already allow a single-family detached dwelling. For example, this includes duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, attached homes, housing like that. Right now, what Ken was referring to is that there is some rulemaking going on at the state. One of the issues that I think has been cleared up based on our conversations from staff to our lobbyist was related to how master plans like this one would treat middle housing. So long story short, we cannot prohibit the development of middle housing in our residential zones, like our single family zones, but we could limit density provided that it was at least going to be 15 units to net acre. And since we're not limiting density of housing in this area, we're allowing all types of housing that are allowed in our RL, RS, RM, and RH zones. And we're not limiting their density. That standard that I mentioned of 15 units per acre does not apply to us. So pardon me for the long-winded discussion, but I thought I wanted to get that cleared up as that because the rulemaking is going on right now as we're working on our plan here.
Okay, thanks, Damien. I'll pick up on a couple of others here that came up. Another high-level one for anything that some committee members might perceive as new. We really did try and stay close to things that we talked about along the way. Some of which, though, were things like illustrative site studies, so they weren't approval items, but rather concepts. And what I would suggest is for anything here that we want to make sure that folks understand are potential or conceptual or something, we may just make sure that we flag those and we label them as such. And in terms of your process, really, this is the first of two opportunities that you have to comment on anything that's in this body of work and all the time in between those two meetings. So hopefully that's a helpful kind of two-step process to talk about what you see. A couple specifics on the school shown in the west. We did label it potential. I think it would be appropriate to follow with Sharon's suggestion that we indicate a potential school on the district's property over along 27th. And we make sure that the text also is reinforced to show that there's flexibility intended, that these are just possible locations. So that's one specific responsiveness that I'd put on the list, Sharon, to pump up those annotations. On Steve's comment about how did we determine the Southwest sub area, honest answer, there's really no magic to it. It was a bit of geographic convenience here. There's no intent to change or do anything counter to the reality that we have the east flowing sewer catchment area and we have the west flowing sewer catchment areas, and those are topographic realities. I hope hopefully those are very clear in the other materials in the report. If the committee wanted, we could very easily break the southwest into two so that there's a southwest sub area and a southeast sub area. I just sort of thought of that. That's also geographically convenient to explain the concepts we're showing here. So that would be, I'll put that as a possibility on the list, that we could break this southwest sub area into two. Moving down to Sarah's comment. Actually, this conversation shows that we didn't quite label the Northeast Park with potential park. I could swear it was on there at one point, but I think we ought to add the word conceptual to that. That says conceptual park, and we do the same thing that we're doing with all the other possible public uses here, that we're very clear in the text about what it is and that it is intended as an idea. I'm almost to the done with the ones. Sewer came up a couple of times. Ryan is going to go into more detail about that. Maybe this is a good time, actually. Ryan, if you could talk to us a little bit about how we're not to the finish line on sewer planning, but rather the city is continuing to try and find the optimal system in this area. Could I invite you to comment on sewer?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to, Joe. And Damien, I don't know if we've got another slide later on that has the options a little bit better. I know there was one. Yeah, we do. So I don't know if there's a better one to flip to right now or not.
Let's go up to the one that's in chapter 6. It'll at least show the base system in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good map.
just as a reference there.
Right there. Thank you.
Perfect. So the idea behind that the sewer concept is still evolving really has to do with the DSL property and how that has come forward since we did our initial study. So what you're seeing on the left here is obviously very focused on the Southeast Area Plan, and that 90% of that actually still is correct. The number 4 profile gravity line that runs east-west out to 27th, the number 6 profile gravity line, the orange one that goes north-south, those are the backbones for the Southeast Area Plan. That's nothing to debate on that one. Those are the backbones. So what's interesting, though, is that we've seen some recent options that could potentially take the idea of needing to continue 4 up to the regional station and then building the purple pressure sewer line and then the yellow line on Ferguson. Instead of those, there may be an option to actually, instead of building that pump station, we can actually catch a deep gravity line that follows the eastern edge of the DSL property. So 4 and 6 would basically gravity into a bigger, deeper gravity line that flows behind the county properties, behind the Humane Society, and all the way up the back of the DSL, because they got to get service to their, or sewer to their service area as well. So really the driving factor behind whether or not we do what's shown directly on this slide here, which is the pump station and the pressure line and the Ferguson line, has to do with whether or not DSL has made any movement on their side and whether or not, you know, that line, how far down the DSL development is that going to go? So it's really a timing issue. If DSL weren't in the equation, your answer is right there, what's staring at you on the left right there. That's the sewer solution. But we do have the possibility to not have to build the pump station and not have to build the force main. Now, from a cost perspective, it might not matter that much. I don't think we're talking millions and millions of dollars difference, because then the Southeast Area Plan would be contributing to the DSL line. Because we would be asking them to build it deeper to accommodate the Southeast Area Plan. Or we just keep them completely independent, and here's your solution, and DSL has their own solution. But collectively, from a city perspective, if we can avoid a regional pump station and avoid a pressure main, that just makes all the sense in the world, and we can keep our lines gravity. So it's really a timing perspective. And so, you know, there's this solid solution, and DSL does their own thing. There's the other bookend, which is 4 and 6 with a gravity line into DSL. And then there's potentially a hybrid in there somewhere where if 4 and 6 need to go in, maybe we build an interim station knowing that someday we can take it offline and we don't have to build it as big and have it be built for such a long period. So we have, in my mind, there's 3 options we could lay out there. But again, it all comes down to timing. And the other thing to factor in is, and I know, to Sharon, to your point about the city looking at how much we could help finance and help contribute, I would really say we're not going to get that solution with this plan right now. We're going to have the dollar figures and we're going to have some ideas, but again, based on timing, it could change. The city is going to initiate a new collection system master plan, and we're going to start spending money on that and getting our consultants on board in July of next year. So in another, 8 or 9 months. And as part of that collection system master plan, which of course looks at the whole city, the connection between SEAP and DSL and future expansions will all be considered. So in my mind, that is our best scenario to figure out how this area would factor into other citywide improvements into the overall rates, and to determine, you know, we can go to council and say, hey, what are your priorities? If it's this area plan, here's a solution and here's how we can get it done. But again, I think that's probably enough. But the reason why there are some options on the table really comes down to the timing of the development.
So I'll bring us back to how that all fits into the area plan and finishing our process. Given all of that, the appropriate course and the recommendation is basically to identify the backbone, identify the follow-up decisions and continuing work that needs to occur. And that's where we're headed, we think, with sewer, and also for some of the funding recommendations that will go along with it. So with that, I got all the ones that are in my notes. I feel like I might have skipped over a responsiveness to what Rick commented on. So if I missed something, apologies. Damien, is there an issue or Rick yourself, something else we need to address?
I think I would call upon Rick because I did not make any other notes.
Joe,
so
you got it.
Go ahead, Rick.
No, Joe, you covered it.
We covered it. Okay. Okay. So Sharon, that's what we've got for the staff response, some explanation and 3 specific suggestions.
Great, thank you, Joe and Damien, and great responses, I think, and Ryan, I appreciate the sewer update. I just have a couple of thoughts after hearing that, and then we'll go around and so everybody has another opportunity. I agree with the concept that this is the backbone of the report is really not a regulatory document. And we need to be very careful, as you point out, if we show something that we're very clear that it is not a done deal. So making sure we go back through and identify conceptual add language that is, you know, this is conceptual only and there are alternatives, and so that it's really clear as we can make it. And then I guess my first response on the sewer discussion is great. I think it's nice to have options, but my concern is part of our goal in this committee was to have a finance plan at the end of it. And what I'm hearing from, we don't know what the sewer answer is going to be, and it might not be able to be included in the city's updated collection system master plan until next year. I'm not sure that that is going to allow us to actually have a finance plan that we can, that people can proceed with development after we're done. So that's just my first reaction. Obviously, we still have some time between now and December to continue to work on it, and I'll commit to spending time offline if needed, but that's my first reaction to that. I still hope that we can come out of this with a plan that property owners can feel that they have enough certainty that they can proceed with development. So that's my comment, and we'll go back around starting with Steve Wilson.
Yeah, this is Steve Wilson. Hey, Joe, I just want to say that I think that you guys have done a fabulous job of working with everyone throughout this entire process. I mean, I know this is really difficult. It's a big committee. There's a lot of different opinions and ideas. And, you know, and I think the result has been something that we can all look at and say, hey, this is really quite an accomplishment. You know, and as a group, I think everybody understood up front that this was an advisory committee and we're not setting anything in stone. However, you know, I do believe that with a job well done, there's a high probability of having it adopted. And I think that should be the objective of this group, is to put something out there that can be adopted so that this process can move forward.
Thanks, Steve. Ken Atwell?
Yes, I have been looking at the Easton plan, the Polish development, and he's already anticipating pumping on the eastern, well, on the western extension of what shows on this map as Gravity 4. He will be pumping from the current west end of the city limits. And my question is, if he's going to put in an interim pump station, where do we find some incentives to get him to put in an interim pump station that allows further development of at least the residential land and then wait for the demand from the industrial. The industrial, in terms of pumping capacity, doesn't require a heck of a lot. But so that's my concern, is if he's already found an answer for his portion of it, could he move that pump station? Could the city give him some encouragement to move that pump station to a point that it serves more people? That and also, Sharon, I want to thank you for making sure that when we're done, this pencils for people. Otherwise, this is just on paper. That's it for me.
Thanks, Ken. Don Mill?
I still do not have any additional comments. The ones I've heard are great, and I think they express some great insight, and I'm glad we're listening to it.
Thanks, Don. Casey Berg?
At this time, and I just want to comment that I appreciate your comments as well, Sharon. Just seeing this move forward seems to be everybody's collective goal. So finding that balance, finding an option of fund or.
Casey, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. Can you maybe speak up louder a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to take it off Bluetooth here. So just don't have any extra comments at this point, but really appreciate your comments, Sharon. Want to see this move forward, and I think a mix of funding options to balance everything sounds like a great plan.
Great, thanks, Casey. Sarah Bodo?
Hi, I don't have any further comments. Thanks.
Rick Williams?
Just kind of a general comment. This is a planning exercise unlike any I've ever been involved with in the past. And I think as a group, we've done an admirable job. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but more you, Sharon, for your leadership, the work Damien's done, and the rest of the city staff, and Joe's facilitation skills have been very handy. As long as we remain transparent, I know the development community needs a level of surety to be able to move forward with their planning. And I'm hoping this provides that framework back to council so they can actually get us there in the long run. More than anything else, I'm happy with where we are. And I wanted to, again, thank everybody for their efforts.
Great, thanks, Rick. And Rachel?
Hi. Yeah, I would just like to say that I think that we've done a really good job with this plan, and to reiterate that, you know, we are an advisory committee and this is not a legislative document, that it's just kind of a framework to go off of. Same with any real planning document, it's just a place to move from, and I think that we've done a pretty good job, and whether or not the park goes in there or the school goes in there in the end, having a placeholder for the possibility of it happening is always a good thing.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Butch?
No additional comments.
Okay, I think we've, everybody has had their say. Unless there's somebody that has something else burning that they really want to get off their chest before we toss it back to Damien, I think now's your chance. If you have any last minute things you want to get on the record. All right, Damien,
Sure.
thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, no, pardon me. I was trying to be a good panelist and be on mute, and now I'm unmuted. So thank you, everybody, for your comments. I think, if there's no other questions, I think what we're looking for is just a motion to forward this report for public review. So this would be part of our content for the upcoming open house. The open house would be live online between October 22nd and November 12th. And so folks would have an opportunity to look at everything you've done over the last couple of years, give us feedback, probably ask a lot of the same questions you've had tonight, And, in terms of just understanding where we go from here, after the open house, we would be reconvening as a team to go through the comments, address those in the final document, and then bring that final document with those changes that came from the open house back to you for your December meeting. And then we'd be asking for your approval at that time to forward it to the Planning Commission so they can begin their work to hold at least a work session and then hold their own public hearing on the entire package. Before we take a motion, Sharon, I want to let you know Steve Wilson has his hand up. Steve?
Great, Steve, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Damien. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that, I'm in the development business, and there's been a couple of comments about costs and the ability of anybody to be able to move forward when you have undefined costs, and especially for sewer, and I think that it's really important for us to come up, while there may be another option with that additional property coming in, we do need to have some kind of a cost dollar item to be able to put forward. Otherwise, everything's just going to sit where it is, and you can't, in the development game, sewer is kind of where everything has to start from, and without some idea of what the route is and what the cost is going to be, you just cannot move forward with any type of a project. And so if we want this to sit here, then we kind of pass the buck down the road, or we put something together that at least has a dollar amount to it that people can assess and make decisions based on. That's my only comment.
Hey, sorry, Steve, this is Ryan from the seat again. So that's an excellent point. I totally understand what you're saying, because I've sat at the table enough times trying to solve that myself. So the answer, though, is it's what's shown in Chapter 6 there. It's $18.5 million for sewer. Like, that's the planning number we can move forward with. So if DSL doesn't happen and we don't have that option B, the answer is what's shown there, and it's $18.5 million.
Do you see that coming down with DSL and that participation, or is that going to be just a trade of dollars?
Yeah, honestly, at the end of the day, it's probably a trade of dollars. The only unknown is how much the city could help contribute, to Sharon's point.
And would that vary based on DSL coming in, or would it be a similar amount if they did not come in?
So, no, I think there's probably, if we're looking at the collection system master plan and we're looking at both of these properties and how much benefit and growth that they could provide, it'd be a much stronger argument for me to go to council and say, hey, if you want something to happen, a contribution to either SEAP's 18.5 or DSL's, and I'm just going to say 20, don't quote me on that. If the city can come and help out with that almost 40 million by doing something, you're going to get both of these moving. So that, to me, that's a more compelling argument than doing these independently.
One final question. I mean, how far into their process are they? And would that correspond with the same timing on the Southeast Area Plan?
I might defer. If Russ is on the line, he'd have a better idea of where DSL is in their process. So if he's available, we'll kick it over to him and see where we're at.
Russ is here. Thank you, Russ.
I'm here. So good evening, everyone. Am I loaded up? Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Russ Grace. I'm the director of the Community Development Department here. So we are in initial discussions with the developer that won the RFP through the Department of State Lands for the development of the DSL. They're going through their due diligence, creating their plans. We're in preliminary discussions with them. They're trying to get to probably a master plan submittal to the city in their eyes as early as possible, but realistically it's probably sometime in the first half of next year when we'd be seeing submittals and starting to process that. We're right in the middle of kind of that initial infrastructure impact and mitigation stage with that development. and are still trying to work through the timing and some other things related to the development, similar to what you're doing here with the southeast area. But it is moving down the path, and we expect it to move into an actual product sometime next year. And I can answer any questions. You know, obviously, we're still in the middle of deciding what's going on there, but if people have specific questions, I can definitely answer those.
So Steve, I saw you still have your hand up. Is that?
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. Did you have another question, or was that just from last time?
It's more, it's just more curious, and as far as, just, how we move forward as a group, because it does sound like you have two paths, and it does make sense to take this whole area and solve the sewer one time rather than two separate paths. As long as they were tracking simultaneously, it does make sense. I'm sure everybody believes that and feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, let me just jump back in. If there is a kind of this ideal synergy between DSL and the southeast area, there's still a lot of questions, as you can imagine, that pop up, specifically around timing, because now we've got one project that's dependent on another project's infrastructure. When DSL moves, they will not develop everything at one time and theoretically build that pipe at one time. So it's really going to be, that's part of the discussions we've been having around the funding plan for this, is especially in the southeast area, there are so many different variables of, I guess, possibilities of how development could occur, when it's going to occur, how big it's going to be, where it's going to be, that we're going to have to kind of address those as those situations come up and see what solution set is working at that time. I mean, I think we're going to get more into that discussion as we continue through this, but with DSL, it's because we're working with one entity, we can define that a little bit better, but I just want to set the right expectation of, even if DSL moves forward and the ultimate goal is to build that line through DSL and it works to get over here, that's all not going to happen with the first phase, unless there are other actions probably in both cities to help get that line constructed, and obviously funding comes into that and everything else.
So Russ, would that be wise then to still plan for that force main? And I mean, that's a big project, and it might take them multiple years to get down as far as down to 27th Street if they're starting on the other end with their sewer. And
yeah,
so are you looking at a joint, maybe a dual system that then at some point rolls into that gravity feed on the backside of DSL?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of variables. So just to kind of set expectations correctly, right now, as Ryan kind of alluded to, we are just seeing if this is in the realm of possibility. It has not been clearly defined that we, some initial engineering has been done. Looks like there's a possibility. The DSL team is kind of verifying that right now, just to see if, in fact, we can actually do this or not. And it really will depend on timing. It's also going to depend on, how the funding comes together, either for that pump station and force main combination, or do we redirect those funds over to help that other portion of that gravity line to get over there? And obviously, that correlates to timing of everybody, like how fast is DSL moving, how fast does the southeast area want to move, and how long would it take to get that whole line constructed? And we would be evaluating that, based off of whatever that situation is when someone wants to move, and then determining, will that work? If not, then what are the appropriate alternatives that we can look at to provide either permanent or interim solution until that ultimate solution comes. So you can understand, you can start to see the complexity of the variability that we're going into here. We're more than prepared to have those discussions, but we really need to know what the plan is with development in the southeast area, specifically who's ready to go, who's not, to help us figure out how that will come together. One of the biggest questions for us is that sewer infrastructure, regardless if it's the gravity line or the force main and pump station, it is a significant investment. It's going to be extremely hard for one development to carry. And so how does that get funded, and how does that get in place is probably one of the biggest things, because sewer is such a binary question to the development of the eastern portion of the southeast area, that we've got to figure out how do we get that funding. to make that type of investment before anybody can really move and do anything.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, Russ.
Sharon, I'm going to jump back in. We've kind of started to bleed over a little bit into the infrastructure updates, I think, but so we're going to probably talk about this some more, and maybe we can defer this conversation to that agenda item, because I think we need to get the draft report behind us and then move on. So.
And Sharon, I have a suggestion to make on that.
Yeah.
Building off of Damien's comment, I think because the nature of the comments of be clear about the conceptual nature of the parks and the schools and anything else like that, since we're going out to the public next, my suggestion would be we do 3 things as part of the motion here. The motion would include recommended changes to be clear about the conceptual and flexible nature of schools, to be clear about the conceptual nature of the park shown in the Northeast plan, and that we break the Southwest sub-area into 2 graphics. And with those staff recommended changes, that's how we would suggest the motion be framed up.
So moved.
Okay.
So that was moved by, was that
Sharon.
Smith?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is Steve Wilson. I'll second that.
Do we have any further discussion before I call a roll call vote?
Sharon, if I may, Joe, could you repeat your third part of the motion regarding breaking up the Southwest area?
Yeah, we take the Southwest area community plan drawing and just break it into 2 graphics so that there's a Southwest and a Southeast.
Thank you.
Pretty simple exercise to do.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion and the second? All right, I will do a roll call vote. Steve Wilson?
Yes.
Ken Atwell?
I'm hesitant, but I'll say yes.
Thanks, Ken. Don Mill?
Yes.
Casey Berg?
Yes.
Sarah Bodo?
Yes.
Rick Williams?
Aye.
Rachel Zackham?
Yes.
Butch Hanson?
Aye.
Sharon Smith votes yes. Back to you, Joe.
Okay, so that's unanimous. We'll move ahead with that draft, and of course, it comes back to you in December. Okay, let's move to the next agenda item if we could. So the code updates is next. And Damien, I'm mindful of the time, so if we could keep this fairly crisp, that would enable committee discussion time.
All right, thank you, Joe. In the spirit of keeping things brief and moving, what we have before you tonight is a final memo that we believe summarizes all the changes to the Bend Development Code that we've discussed with you since we started our work. If you recall, we began working on code back at your December meeting. We brought back a couple of iterations of code language at your 2 prior subsequent meetings. And really what we have today, we think, is with the memo included in your packet is an outline of all the changes to the Bend Development Code dealing with specific land uses and development standards that we would then take forward to draft as actual code language. As an example, if you've ever participated in a hearing with the Bend Planning Commission and they're looking at changes to the Bend Development Code, they will have drafts that have language citing the code, new language underlined, language to be changed, deleted. With your your kind of thumbs up tonight. If you're satisfied with the work we've done and the changes we're going to talk about, then that would be our next step, where we would take the concepts that you see, that we've discussed. We would draft actual code language, working closely with our planning staff and the current planning division, and then bring that back to you at your December meeting so you can go through it and make sure that we've covered all the topics that you've recommended we cover. That would not be the final say on the matter because, as you know, we would need to take it to the Bend Planning Commission. They would have an opportunity to review, and we need to conduct a hearing on this before making a recommendation to the City Council, who would then conduct their own review. Next slide, please. So for the remainder of this topic, I'm not going to go through the memorandum in your packet, but I will touch upon what we had identified as the remaining issues from your last meeting in July. I'm going to start briefly with the electric vehicle charging stations. I believe this is a comment that was made by James DeRofi. This is one where we're not recommending any additional changes to the code for the Southeast Area Plan because electric vehicle charging stations are already allowed wherever we have commercial parking lots. They are processed through a process in our code called a minimum development standards exemption. They have to get building and electrical permits to connect to power, but there's no limitation on where they're allowed. Next slide, please. So with respect to the public facilities zone in the Southeast Area Plan, all the permitted and conditional uses that are currently allowed citywide in our public facilities district would be allowed in the Southeast Area Plan. What we tried to do is work with the Park District to see if there are certain uses such as ball fields and outdoor performance areas with amplified sound that might be permitted outright instead of requiring a conditional use permit. And we were looking at some siting standards, dealing with things like setbacks, having these kind of facilities oriented toward busier streets, and offering that as an option, depending on what the Park District would do, particularly with the High Desert Park. I should be clear that this would be something specific to the High Desert Park when the district is ready to develop it. And depending on what they're doing when they get around to developing it, if those standards could be met, they would still have an option for a conditional use permit to deal with a lot of those same issues. Next slide, please. And then to close the loop on our drive-through standards for the Southeast area, we have some recommended changes to how those are permitted in the commercial general zone. And this is something I believe Rachel Strickland brought up in her comments. So we're prohibiting or recommending that the language prohibit drive-through lanes between buildings and a street, that the facilities actually be oriented away from the street, and we prohibit any kind of standalone parking that would be established after, say, like a coffee hut might be established as a way to get around these rules. There's also some existing code that I wanted to highlight. Under our parking standards, we already have what are called special standards for commercial customer parking, so that whenever someone's developing a parking area that's going to be have an opportunity for people to cross parking stalls to get to an entrance, they have to make certain treatments to satisfy the Americans with Disabilities Act, and make sure that there's some kind of treatment on site so that both drivers and pedestrians know that there's going to be a crossing in a location. Next slide, please. And then to close the loop on marijuana businesses in the general commercial zone, the team is not recommending any additional regulations for dispensaries or retailers. These are already regulated under the Bend Development Code, including the spacing requirements for schools. So these would also apply as written in the general commercial zone. We are going to recommend, consistent with what we have proposed for our light industrial and mixed employment zones, that we prohibit marijuana wholesale, but we do recommend allowing testing and research and development facilities. These would be consistent with other similar uses in the Southeast Area Plan Code. And I think we might have showed this image at our last meeting. This is an example of an existing testing and research facility that is located on Obi Riley Road in the commercial district there, close to, I believe, some dental offices in Petco on Highway 97. Next slide, please. I believe this is our final slide. With respect to the Trees and Rocks Code, we do recommend including a exemption for what we're calling larger footprint uses, those that are greater than 40,000 square feet, and accessory uses like parking lots. This would capture larger retailers such as Market of Choice, Albertsons, Grocery Outlet. And we don't have any changes to the rock outcrop code that we had discussed at your last meeting. And I believe that's our last slide on this topic. So I think now we are ready to see if there's any questions. Questions, comments, direction.
This is Sharon. Go ahead.
I'll raise my hand. I don't have a way to do it other than just butt in.
Okay.
I would hope that you could take a look at the code exceptions that Polish got for Easton and make sure that the setbacks and lot sizes and so forth are consistent. With that, I'd hate to put the Southeast area at a competitive disadvantage. And congratulations, Wilson.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Yeah.
This is Sharon. Rather than go around Robin, I think maybe we should just, if people have questions or comments, so we can keep the interest of time. And I'll say my comment now. I think as always, the devil's in the details, and we don't have the actual code language in front of us. I would ask that this be provided to us well in advance of our next meeting, so we all have an opportunity to look at it and meaningfully understand it before we have to vote on it in December. And just for this group, I am looking carefully at the code, and one of the things I think we need to include in the code language itself is how we're going to treat in the tree preservation requirements, how we are going to treat trees in existing rights of way, because the current code is not prescriptive. And so it doesn't talk about what happens if you've got a tree in an existing dedicated right of way. In my opinion, you shouldn't have to preserve that because it's already in the right of way. So I'm going to be making my recommendation, my suggestion in that vein as city staff drafts things. But if anybody has any thoughts about that, let me know. And again, I would really encourage everybody to take a look at the code when it comes out, because that's where the devil's in the details. So anybody else have any thoughts or comments?
Yep, Steve Wilson had his hand raised. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, my only comment was we had some discussion about the drive-throughs, and I'm still not clear why those have to be on the inside of a building and not on the outside. You've got different businesses, different designs. Does anybody remember why that came about with that concept?
Steve, this is Sharon. I think it originated because originally there was a prohibition on drive-throughs. And I said, I think we need to rethink that given the pandemic, where drive-throughs become an essential component to restaurant survivability in some cases. So I think the thought was, let's allow it, but have standards so that it doesn't become just like a drive-through fast food, 3rd Street. And I think Rick Williams also had concerns about just the pedestrian walkability when you allow unlimited drive routes facing the street.
It just seems to me that we could, come up with something better than that has at least a standard, so that the business owners have the ability to design something going either side, that would accommodate, if it's concern for pedestrians, then, making sure that pedestrians are protected, and not put a design criteria in that forces somebody maybe not be able to utilize their property the way they want to. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other raised hands right now. So then, thank you very much for your comments. What we will do next, as I said, is go back with the team to draft the actual code language so you can see what that looks like. Just for our purposes, any feedback on how many, so typically we've been giving the packet out a week in advance of the meeting. Any suggestions 2 weeks in advance? Sharon flashes me the 2 sign, okay.
Peace.
Peace. So
2
here
weeks,
3
I
or
think.
is 2 weeks adequate?
I think 2 weeks probably would do it.
Okay.
And Steve, I might suggest that, if you have some specific ideas or suggestions about that code language, about how you could allow a different drive-through configuration, maybe, make that as part of the code language discussion, and maybe we can revisit it in December.
Well, Sharon, I don't really have an idea on that. I'm not in the commercial business. I just know that when it comes to development, there's design criteria that gets put in because of maybe one thought, that when it comes time to actually build something, it inhibits the ability to be able to use the property. Not every property is the same, not every site's the same, and not every building's going to be the same. And so we wind up with these things that really inhibit the ability to be able to be creative with a piece of property and do something different than what that standard is.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and just thinking, because I do think code stuff, maybe there's an opportunity to say you could do a conditional use drive-through, so you would have to, meet some higher criteria standards. I can talk with Damien and the team and you offline about that.
Yeah, no, I don't have a dog in that hunt. I just know where it's, some of these design criteria components do inhibit the ability to be able to build something later on.
And then I do see that Rick Williams has a hand up. Rick, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, just briefly as part of this. If you go back to the early visioning that we did for this area, pretty routinely you heard people talk about wanting to have a walkable, bikeable area. And that's where my comments came through for drive-through conveniences. They are a fairly inefficient land use to begin with, and most of the planning profession has data to back that up. And on top of it, it's got safety related issues. So if you're going to have drive-through conveniences, you need to have them set up in such a way, have standards in place that still allows the community to be bikeable and walkable. That was my only point. And the reason we have criteria like this is on development in general is because you don't want to have, you want surety. You don't want a hog rendering plant next to your grade school. That's why we have code. So we have to be cautious about having unlimited flexibility for development. That's my only point. You need something that matches the vision that was laid out by the group. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. All right, Chair Smith, I'm not seeing any other raised hands on this topic, so I would suggest we take our marching orders, go forward and draft code, and then get it to you at least 2 weeks ahead of your meeting in December.
That'd be great. Thanks, Damien. I think we can move on.
All right.
Okay. So we're on to infrastructure, and we actually covered part of this. So let's go to the next slide if we could. This is an informational item, but we didn't talk about transportation. So Russ, if you're still with, well, Damien, I need a reminder. Were you going to talk about this or Russ?
I'm going to start and then turn to Russ to see if there's anything he would like to add or
Perfect.
for his help in answering any questions. So
okay.
I think in the interest of time, I think we've done a pretty good job talking about sewer. So I want to talk about transportation. So one of the things that the city's been working on since our last meeting, as you might have already kind of heard, is been working with Polish Homes on their Easton Master Plan, which is the kind of the northern rectangle outside of the Southeast Area Plan. They just received approval of a master plan, and as part of that, they'll be required to construct that part of the east-west collector that's now being called Caldera through their property. There's some multimodal improvements to 15th along their frontage, and they'll be constructing roundabouts at 15th and Caldera, along with Ferguson and 15th. So those are some of the projects that will, changes that will come off, so to speak, the list of things, list of projects for the Southeast Area Plan with respect to transportation. Going back to DSL for a minute, as Rush mentioned, we're in preliminary discussions with them regarding their work and what those infrastructure mitigations might be. Still working to identify, really which area will be responsible for or share the cost of building certain improvements, particularly intersection improvements, the roundabouts that you see there. And one of the things that will influence kind of finishing this work will be the results of the November election to see if the transportation bond passes, to see if there are projects that will be bond funded or not. So I'm going to stop there and see if Russ, did you have any other comments or anything I've missed or that you need to correct regarding transportation?
No, I think, we've kind of, I think the main thing is we know what what all the improvements are for all these different developments. And we've been, now we're just trying to figure out how to kind of assign them to the appropriate developments and then look at what the funding looks like in terms of SDC credits and things like that. So we're right in the middle of all that conversation, but we have clearly identified what the universe of improvements are. And I think we're honing in on what that solution set looks like very quickly.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So on sewer, I don't know that we've got anything new to add that we already haven't talked about. Just to recap briefly, we're evaluating some of the recent work from Jacobs and Murray Smith regarding potential solutions that would serve maybe both the DSL property in Southeast. And I think I'll just stop there since we covered a lot of that originally and just see, Ryan, do you have any additional comments for SEAPAC on the work we're doing regarding sewer?
No, thank you, Damien. I think we've said what we needed to say unless there's any other questions.
Okay. So before we take questions, one final slide. Next slide, please. So regarding water, as you might remember, this is an area that's within the boundary of the Avion Water Company. I think we've been working with them pretty well to kind of narrow down what the network would look like for or where they're going to expect water lines to be built. One change to report is that they have shared with us, instead of trying to extend a single 24-inch main from the intersection of 15th and not to the intersection of Ferguson and 27th, they're open to more of a network or web of multiple lines. We're trying to look at centralized alignments to serve the largest number of properties and make sure that these are actually located within existing and future rights of way, so that property is not encumbered with a public utility easement that might be crossing their property. So I think we've got our really kind of our final feedback from Avion. They're still engaged and we're staying in touch with them. And are there any questions on what we've covered tonight regarding infrastructure? Okay.
I don't really have a question, but I just have a comment, if that's okay. Sharon speaking.
Please. Please.
Just in terms of thinking ahead to getting things jump started in this area. And as you point out, sewer is going to be a linchpin. If we don't have sewer, we can't develop. Water is similar, you know, and roads to some extent, although got to have the water and the sewer there. And those are pretty long lines. So in talking about it with staff, one thing that we might do as a group, and the school district is willing to do, and so I'm raising it, and I think Parks is also on board. If we have property that is in a future right-of-way that we're not ready to develop, if we as a group, and the school district is willing to do this, they're willing to dedicate the right-of-way in advance of their own development at no cost, just to facilitate development. So for example, if there's additional land needed along 27th Street, abutting the school district property, or where the north-south road on the west boundary, which is already partially dedicated, if somebody wanted to go forward and they needed that right of way and we weren't ready to develop, the district is willing to go ahead and dedicate that up front. So I throw that out to the group for people to start thinking about, because even if you aren't ready to develop, but you know when you do, you're going to have to dedicate right of way. If you're willing to do it so somebody else can go forward, that will just benefit you in the long run. So I raise this as a concept for the group to think about. Back to you, Damien.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. Before we wrap up, let's see. I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I think we can move on to our next agenda item, which is our final public comment. I'm going to go back to our queue and see if anybody has a raised hand to let us know they're going to talk. And I'm not seeing any right now. So I think we can move on to our final item on the agenda. So Joe, back to you.
So next steps are for the team to make the changes that were directed tonight, put together an online open house that will run in part of October, part of November. That will give us some additional community feedback and at least awareness of the work that has been accomplished by the committee. And then parallel with that, staff will be working on the funding plan that we talked about at several points tonight. And that will be brought for you in December. So the package coming to you in December for your final meeting, what we hope is a final meeting, will include the updated summary report, the code in its detailed form, and then the funding plan as well. So a lot to cover in that meeting. We'll see how we do. As a heads up, we might want to plan on it being a 3-hour meeting with a break in the middle of it. And Sharon and I will work together to craft that agenda to see if we can get the timing right to cover the material appropriately. So another save the date notice here. That's Thursday, December 3rd, beginning at 5:30. That's all I've got, Damien.
All right, thank you. And just one more note on the online open house. We will be emailing pretty broad audience to get feedback on the summary report. and everything we've done on the area plan. We'll be emailing all of you. So feel free, once you get this link to the summary report, to share it with your friends, neighbors, neighborhood association, partners. Get it out there so we can get as much comment as we can. And Chair Smith, I think that concludes everything.
I just have one last comment. Of course, I have to keep talking. I just wanted to thank Damien and Joe and the team. I think the report is really well done, very comprehensive. You guys put a lot of work into it, and we're going to nitpick everything, but just thank you for all the great work that you've done, and city staff for diving into this really hard conundrum of how do you put a puzzle together for infrastructure. And although I can be a little critical at times, I think we're all doing great work, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So I think with that, we are concluded, and we will see you all soon.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and your hard work, everybody. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.